She wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that grand hall, not among the smartest in the city. Her uniform made her stand out, her silence made them laugh. But behind those tired eyes was something no one saw coming. One challenge. One riddle. One chance to change everything. And by the time it was over, even the billionaire would never forget her name. Julia had been working at Lena's cafe for nearly 2 years, and every day felt like a small battle she had to fight and win. She arrived long before the city streets filled with noise, and left only after the hum of traffic had dulled into a distant memory. Her hands were often raw from washing dishes and carrying heavy trays, and her feet ached from hours of standing on hard floors. Life had never been gentle, and Julia knew that well. Her mother's health had been failing for months, leaving Julia to manage not only their home, but also every bill, every grocery, every small responsibility that came with keeping life from slipping through her fingers. She had grown used to exhaustion, to invisible bruises on her heart and spirit, to the quiet frustration of always being overlooked. Yet she never let herself stop. Giving up was never an option, not when someone depended on her. She had learned to smile even when she wanted to scream, to keep moving even when every muscle in her body begged her to rest, and to hold her head high even when the world seemed to weigh against her. She found small joys where she could, an unexpected tip left by a kind customer, a shared laugh with a colleague, a brief moment of sunlight hitting the worn cafe tiles, but most of her satisfaction came from survival itself, from knowing that she had managed another day. It was on one of these ordinary afternoons that she noticed a banner across the street. At first she thought she had imagined it. Her mind was tired, always on the verge of drifting into worry. But as she stepped closer, the letters became clear. The Billionaire's Challenge. Solve the riddle. Claim the reward. She stopped and read the smaller print, learning that this was a riddle that had stumped the city's smartest minds for decades. Every year people tried and failed, and every year their attempts became cautionary tales, whispered about in cafes and offices with a mix of amusement and pity. Julia felt a spark inside her she hadn't felt in a long time. Her heartbeat quickened, her stomach fluttered. This wasn't just a puzzle. It was a door, and it had somehow opened in front of her. A door that could, if she dared to walk through it, change everything. She thought about her mother and the growing stack of unpaid bills, about their cramped apartment, about the future that seemed to close in a little more each month. She thought about herself, about the cleverness she had learned from juggling tables, counting money, and solving small crises in her cafe life. Maybe this challenge was impossible, but so had been every day she had survived. Later that evening, Julia shared her thoughts with her closest colleague, someone who had worked alongside her for years, enduring the same long shifts, the same demanding customers, the same exhaustion. "I'm going to enter the challenge," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Her friend's face tightened, brows drawn together. "Julia, are you serious?" she asked. "That challenge isn't for people like us. It's for geniuses, for those with resources and years of preparation. You just humiliate yourself." Julia shook her head, a soft smile on her lips. "Maybe," she said, "but I can't let fear decide for me. I have to try. I have to know if I can do it." Her friend opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. Julia returned to her work, wiping down tables, refilling coffee cups, cleaning crumbs from the counter. Still, her mind churned with possibility. She imagined standing in that hall, looking at the riddle that had broken so many minds. She imagined herself thinking, calculating, noticing patterns, refusing to give up even when the odds seemed stacked against her. Over the next 2 days, Julia prepared as best she could. She didn't have fancy books, tutors, or a team of advisors. She had only her own mind, her sharp instincts, and the years of problem-solving she had learned while running the cafe and managing life's challenges. She spent every spare moment practicing small puzzles, thinking about logic and patterns, testing herself silently as the city moved on without noticing her small preparations. Each time a thought struck her, she wrote it down in a small notebook she carried in her pocket, reviewing it whenever she had a free minute. The night before the challenge, she lay awake in her modest apartment. The room was small, dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of worn furniture and the faint aroma of yesterday's dinner. Her mother was asleep, her breathing uneven, the weight of illness heavy in the quiet room. Julia stared at the ceiling, hands folded across her chest, and thought about everything that had led her here. Every long shift, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt and fear, each had been practice for something bigger. The challenge wasn't just about winning money. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above limitations, that she could take the skills life had forced her to develop and apply them where it mattered most. She thought about the stories of others who had tried the challenge. Brilliant people, rich people, confident people, all defeated. And she thought, maybe she didn't need to be the richest or the most educated to succeed. Maybe determination, clarity, and courage were enough. Her mind raced as she replayed puzzles she had solved in her own life, patterns she had noticed, connections she had made. Slowly, the anxiety gave way to a calm determination. She would enter this challenge. She would do her best. Morning arrived with the usual city noise. Julia dressed simply. Clean blouse, worn jeans, hair tied back loosely. She had no grand entrance planned, no dramatic appearance. She only carried herself with the quiet focus of someone who knew what was at stake and what she could handle. On the way to the hall, she noticed the buzz of the city around her. People going about their ordinary lives, unaware of the small woman heading toward a challenge that could change everything. Arriving at the venue, she paused outside, taking in the massive hall, the polished floors, the banners, the throng of competitors in their sharp suits and expensive shoes. Confidence radiated from every side of the room, and whispers followed her as she stepped inside. Some faces looked at her and sneered. Some barely gave her a second glance. She felt small, but she refused to shrink. She reminded herself of the battles she had fought already, the resilience she carried without anyone noticing. Every hardship had prepared her for this moment. Every long hour of work, every dismissed idea, every time she had been underestimated. The billionaire overseeing the event stood on a platform, tall and imposing, scanning the room with a faint smirk. His gaze settled on her briefly, and Julia met it without flinching. He expected fear or hesitation, but she had neither. She had her mind, her preparation, and her resolve. Around her, other contestants fidgeted with their papers, whispering strategies and checking devices. Julia allowed herself a quiet smile. She didn't need to prove anything to them, not yet. She only needed to trust herself. As the crowd settled and the first instructions were about to be given, Julia felt her focus sharpen. The nervous fluttering in her stomach had transformed into alertness. She was aware of every sound, the shuffle of feet, the murmur of whispers, the quiet hum of anticipation. Her mind began to run through potential scenarios, patterns, strategies, possibilities. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, to calm the rapid beating of her heart, and then centered herself. For the first time in a long while, Julia felt fully alive. This was bigger than the cafe, bigger than unpaid bills, bigger than exhaustion or doubt. This was a test not just of skill, but of courage, determination, and resilience. She did not yet know how it would end. She did not know if she would succeed. But she knew this. She would face it head on. She would not shrink. She would not let fear decide for her. A group of young participants, all talking loudly near the refreshment table, turned toward her. One of them smirked and whispered something that made the others laugh. Julia pretended not to notice, but her stomach tightened. She caught a fragment of what they said. Is she lost? Maybe she came to serve, not to play. Her uniform gave them reason to assume that. The light blue blouse and dark apron weren't exactly made for a ballroom like this, but it was all she had. The only decent set of clothes she owned, pressed carefully the night before. Her fingers brushed over a tiny coffee stain near the hem. She hoped no one would notice. Still, she refused to shrink. She stood a little straighter, remembering why she came. This wasn't about fitting in. It was about proving something to herself. On the main stage, the billionaire took the microphone. His presence was commanding. Tall, confident, the kind of man used to being listened to. The crowd fell silent almost instantly. Welcome, everyone, he said, his voice smooth and deep. Each year we gather here to face one question. A question that has gone unanswered for decades. My great-grandfather left this riddle behind, and so far no one has been able to solve it. A soft murmur swept through the hall. People looked both nervous and excited. The billionaire's eyes scanned the audience. When his gaze landed briefly on Julia, There was a flicker of confusion, then amusement. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth before he looked away. Julia caught it, but she didn't flinch. She had seen that smile before, from customers who thought they knew everything, from classmates who used to mock her quietness. She knew what it meant, disbelief. She didn't have the time or energy to argue, nor did she want to waste mental energy on their assumptions. She had a riddle to solve, and every second counted. Still, she allowed herself a flicker of amusement. They thought her unworthy because of her uniform, because of the life she lived, because she did not look like the polished participants around her. That would be their mistake. The billionaire overseeing the event cleared his throat, commanding attention. His eyes scanned the room, lingering briefly on Julia before moving on. The rules were simple. A complex riddle appeared on the main screen, and the first participant to submit a correct solution would be declared the winner. When the riddle finally appeared, it was far more intricate than Julia expected. A puzzle designed to twist logic and patience together. Around her, participants leaned forward, scribbling furiously, consulting their devices, whispering to one another. She could feel the glances again, the dismissive looks, the subtle shaking of heads, the barely contained laughter as they noticed her quiet approach. She reminded herself again, this is not about appearances. This is about the mind. Minutes passed and murmurs of frustration spread like wildfire. A few participants raised their hands, admitting defeat. Others groaned, realizing their complex strategies weren't working. One of the young men who had smirked at her before leaned back, rubbing his forehead. "I don't get it," he muttered. "This is impossible." Another participant shook her head, muttering, "We're missing something obvious." Julia, meanwhile, traced the logic quietly in her notebook, connecting dots that others hadn't even considered. The whispers and smirks continued, but Julia didn't care. Each glance, each dismissal only sharpened her focus. She remembered her long shifts, the way she had solved problems in the cafe that no one else could, the small crises she had navigated while others doubted her. This was just another challenge, another problem, and she had learned to think clearly under pressure. The uniform she wore, the one good outfit she owned, was irrelevant. The world might overlook her, but she could not overlook herself. Across the hall, the confident participants began to panic. The clock ticked down, and some were muttering to themselves, tapping their pens against paper, flipping pages frantically. Julia's mind was quiet but active, moving pieces into place, testing theories, double-checking assumptions. She felt a thrill she hadn't felt in years, the familiar satisfaction of a mind at work, solving what others deemed unsolvable. The murmurs of doubt around her only faded into background noise, like wind through a window. Suddenly, the young man who had smirked earlier slammed his notebook shut. "I give up," he muttered. A few others followed, shaking their heads in disbelief. Julia noticed their frustration, their confusion, and even their humiliation. Yet she did not feel superior, only focused. She had a chance, one opportunity to prove to herself, not anyone else, that determination and clarity could succeed where arrogance and assumption failed. The room grew quiet, except for the faint scratching of pens and the occasional cough. Julia traced her logic slowly, carefully, making sure she wasn't overlooking a detail. The participants around her were failing, panicking and whispering apologies to one another for mistakes they hadn't even considered. Her heart pounded, adrenaline flowing not out of fear but exhilaration. She could feel that she was close, that the solution was within reach. And then came a moment, a flash of understanding, a connection of pieces that others had missed entirely. Julia paused, letting it solidify in her mind. She knew the solution, not because she was lucky, not because she had fancy tools or status, but because she had trained her mind through years of hardship, observation, and careful thought. She straightened in her chair, calm now, ready. Around her, whispers still floated, glances still lingered. She felt the sting of their scorn, but it was powerless now. This was her moment, and she would not allow anyone's doubt to distract her. Whatever came next, she was ready to act, to speak, and to show that brilliance often came from places no one expected. Places like herself, a small-town waitress in a simple blouse, standing tall in a world that had overlooked her for far too long. Minutes passed. One by one, contestants gave up or submitted wrong answers. their confidence collapsing under the pressure. A few glanced at Julia, their faces pale as they noticed her calm demeanor. "How is she so sure?" one of them muttered under his breath, still smirking but now uncertain. Julia only smiled faintly, inwardly acknowledging that years of hardship had taught her something that no wealth or appearance could. Intelligence, focus, and courage could outweigh the odds stacked against you. Finally, the moment came. She stood, her voice steady, clear, and confident. "The answer is," she spoke, delivering the solution she had carefully verified in her mind. A hush fell over the hall. Contestants froze, some in disbelief, some whispering that it couldn't be true. The billionaire, who had been observing with that faint smirk, now leaned forward, his expression shifting into astonishment. He walked down from the platform, moving slowly toward her, every step deliberate. The room was silent, the tension so thick it felt like it could be sliced with a knife. Julia felt a flicker of nervousness, but it was fleeting. She reminded herself, she had done the work, she had trusted herself, and now she was standing in truth. When he reached her, he looked her over, his gaze landing on her simple blouse, her plain jeans, and her worn shoes. For a moment, Julia feared judgment. Then he smiled, a genuine smile, and said, "You've done it. You've solved what no one else could. I have to admit, I underestimated you." Julia's chest rose with a quiet swell of pride, though she remained composed. She had done this not for praise, but to prove something to herself. The billionaire studied her for a moment longer. Then his voice softened with sincerity. "Appearance, wealth, and status, they are minor in front of intelligence, perseverance, and courage. Today you've shown that brilliance can come from anywhere, and that determination is the true measure of greatness." The hall erupted in murmurs and whispers, people beginning to understand what had just happened. Julia felt a warmth spreading in her chest, not from recognition alone, but from the knowledge that she had stood firm, had trusted herself, and had triumphed over doubt and scorn. The reward, of course, was waiting. A blank check, an opportunity to change her life in ways she had only dared imagine. She took it with steady hands, knowing that it symbolized far more than money. It was proof that courage and intelligence could outshine every expectation and prejudice. As the applause rose, Julia allowed herself a small, quiet smile. She thought of her mother, of the small apartment, of the long shifts, and of every moment that had prepared her for this challenge. She thought of the participants who had mocked her, the whispers of doubt that had trailed her through the hall, and felt a quiet satisfaction. They had underestimated her. They had judged her by what she wore and where she came from, and she had proven that none of that mattered in the face of determination and intellect. The billionaire stepped closer once more, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Never forget this," he said. "The world will always try to measure you by the wrong things. Let them your mind, your courage, your resilience. That is where your power truly lies. Today you've shown that. Remember it, and never let anyone convince you otherwise." Julia nodded, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Not tears of vanity, not tears of arrogance, but tears of recognition, of the struggle, the perseverance, and the triumph that came from refusing to be defined by circumstance. She realized in that moment that success was not only about winning or being rewarded. It was about standing tall, trusting herself, and proving to herself above all else that she belonged in any room she dared to enter. As she left the hall, the murmurs of admiration still echoing behind her, Julia felt a shift inside her that she could not ignore. The challenge was over, but something far greater had been won: confidence, self-belief, and an unshakable understanding that no appearance, no wealth, and no expectation could ever define her. Walking back through the city streets, clutching the check carefully in her pocket, she allowed herself to think about what could come next. Opportunities, yes, but more importantly, the certainty that she could face challenges she once thought impossible. She thought about the countless others who might be doubted, underestimated, or overlooked, and she smiled quietly. If she could rise above it, so could anyone. Have you ever been doubted, judged by appearances, or told that you didn't belong? What would you do if you trusted your mind and courage instead of fear? Julia's story is a reminder. Intelligence, determination, and resilience are stronger than any prejudice or limitation. Don't let anyone else's opinion define what you are capable of. Like this story? Share it, comment your thoughts, and let us know where you're watching from. Remember, brilliance often comes from the most unexpected places, and the courage to act on it is what makes it shine.